Today, I'm going to talk about how efficiency and robustness are enemies.
Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher.
So, just to start off with some definitions, efficiency means basically that every component is producing at the maximum ability for it to produce. Something is efficient if there is no waste being input that doesn't produce some output. Now, when I talk about efficiency, by the way, this can be in an organization, this can be in a machine, this can be in an animal, it can be in pretty much anything. The concept more or less just works fine, no matter what you're talking about. And in the same way, robustness is the ability to take damage and keep on producing output. So, something is robust, like you can say a machine is robust, for example, if it can take, some amount of damage, if things can hit it and it just keeps on moving, it keeps on doing its job. So if you look at, and you can see that these two things are enemies. They're intrinsically enemies, by the way, for the simple reason, and you can see this in the definitions, that if you can take damage and keep on producing at the same level, then you had components prior to the damage that were not producing at their maximum level, because without their production, you are still overall producing at the same level. On the flip side, with efficiency, you can see how something that is perfectly efficient cannot be robust, because if everything is producing in its output and something sustains damage, it is no longer producing, and so the overall output has to drop. Now, you can just look at, you can see this very easily in animals, for example. You can see the same thing in machines and other circumstances. So if you look at animals, birds are extremely efficient. All of the bird, pretty much, is dedicated towards keeping that thing in flight, or alternatively, the parts that are sort of more long-term, like the digestive system, are very small, and they are as efficient as possible and you can see why very easily. Just go like this. What you felt against your hands, take my hand size, the size of a small bird's wing, and when you go like this, you don't feel very much there, but that force is all of the force that the bird gets. Granted, they go a little faster, but and so they get a bit more force, but basically, do that really fast, and the nothing that you feel on your hands is what a bird whose wings are this big get to use in order to keep themselves in the air. In consequence, they cannot weigh very much at all. They have to cram an entire living organism into approximately no weight. Now, on the flip side, take something that is extremely durable. You can take, say, a rhinoceros. For example, they've got incredibly thick skin. They're really, really durable. You can hit them with all sorts of incredibly heavy things, and nothing really happens. A rhinoceros is extremely durable. It is not, however, very efficient. There is an enormous amount of bulk that doesn't really contribute to the rhinoceros doing very much in any particular action, which is why, though surprisingly fast for an animal of their bulk, they're not very fast, and most of the time they don't move very fast at all. There are two very big extremes, and you can see the same thing in machinery. Airplanes, again, need to be extremely efficient, and so this is why they are inspected constantly. If you look at, what goes on in airlines when the things are actually running, this is being made during the COVID-19 pandemic, and so they're not running nearly as much these days. But if you look at when they're inspected constantly. They're looked over constantly because they are very, very efficient machines, and because of that, small things that go wrong mean that they fall out of the sky. In contrast to that, take a machine like a bulldozer. A bulldozer is not constantly looked over in order to make sure that all the parts are definitely intact, because they're made incredibly durably. They're phenomenally strong. And so you can put them through tremendous amounts of stress, and they just keep on going. It's really, really hard to actually do anything to them. I mean, you can break them, but it's not easy, because they are meant to be extremely durable, because they undergo enormous stresses. So these are two extremes, and you can see that. Now, where you will see this especially, or where it's not as obvious, but where you really see the effects of this, are when you look at organizations and you look at economies. That an organization which is extremely efficient is by that nature not going to be very robust. And you see this all the time in the efficiency of small businesses in comparison to the robustness of large businesses. In small businesses, each person is able to do an awful lot. They're able to express a lot of creativity. They're able to accomplish an awful lot. But on the flip side, something happens to them, that business tends to be in a fair amount of trouble because each person was contributing so much, and each other person is also contributing so much in their own way that you don't have much in the way of resources to cover. It's one reason why in small businesses it is frequently the case that if somebody's on vacation or somebody's out sick or what have you, you often will get told, like, I'm sorry, we can't do that right now till Ed gets back. And when Ed gets back, we'll be able to handle that for you. They're efficient, but they're not very robust. On the flip side, if you look at big organizations, there's really large mammoth corporations where everybody's just a cog in the machine. Well, they're very robust against individuals, getting sick, individuals taking vacation, and so on. One person, there are 30 people who do the exact same job and are required to do it in the exact same way. So none of them are allowed to do it very well, but they are all required to do it in the same way, so that if 3 of them are sick and 2 of them are on vacation, no big deal. The other ones just keep on doing the same thing in basically the same way, and the organization keeps marching on. They're not very efficient, but they are very robust. And in general, this is one of the things, if you look, small businesses sometimes they last a really long time. But that said, small businesses get, sort of spring into existence very easily, and often, something goes wrong, they just, fall out of existence. Whereas the large companies got that way, typically speaking, by being around for a while, and so they adapt and adapt and adapt to all the things that can go wrong, and so they become very robust, but not very efficient, which is one reason why you actually see this interesting interplay of the large business, sort of farms out the innovation, the efficiency to small businesses, and then when they come up with, when they have processes that will actually come up with new ideas and things like that, and sort of make them actually work in some sort of reasonable way and reasonable time frame, then the big business steps in and buys this and industrializes the process to make it much more robust and inefficient. So when you look at businesses, and it can drive you crazy how inefficient they are, there's a reason why they're so inefficient, though. I mean, there are lots of reasons. There are threads that sort of weave together to make the cloth, and there are lots of things that go wrong, and things like people who are trying to spread the blame around so that nobody can be blamed for anything, and so on. People react to the incentives that they're given. But a major thread is that these businesses have been around through all sorts of things going wrong and have adapted to try to prevent these things going wrong again in the future and to withstand these things going wrong. And the more you are able to withstand going wrong, the less you actually get done given the number of people you have on hand. Now, of course, this can, this can become sclerotic. This can become overdone, which is why, kind of like, the Chesterton's fence, if you want a white fence post, you must be continually repainting it white. Otherwise, you'll have a, dingy gray fence post before too long. And so this is one of the effects that goes on. But if you want to understand human organizations, this is a key aspect to understanding it, that efficiency and robustness are enemies, and things that survive will become more robust over time. And some of the time you have to pare back that robustness because you'll be robust against things you're not going to have to face again, all the while being vulnerable to things you may actually have to face. So there is that when it comes to human organizations. There's a similar thing that happens on a larger scale, though, to economies, and especially because the nature of competition tending to force people to be more efficient, because so many people and organizations buying things are price conscious, and price for a good is a measure of the efficiency of manufacture of that good. And when so many people want to buy the cheapest thing they can, they are forcing efficiency onto the manufacturers. And you might say that this is a good thing, and in some cases it probably is, but it also brings with it a major danger, which is that when you become very, very efficient, you can't deal with shocks to the system very well at all. A good case in point is the nature of just-in-time manufacturing, that you're only manufacturing things as you need to be delivering them so that you don't keep inventory on hand, because manufacturing goods ahead of their sale and then keeping them around on hand is very expensive. You need to buy the raw materials, so you need lots of money to buy the raw materials, And then you need money to safely store the things so they don't get damaged by weather and thieves can't steal them and so on. And so you need to spend money to do all of that stuff, all while you're not getting paid for any of it, to maintain a large inventory, to be able to maintain output should, some sort of problem happen. Things like having, things that you'll see in very, very efficient businesses is that all of your lines are run 24 hours a day and they are run continuously. And so if you need to increase output, you need to invest major capital investments in getting up another assembly line within the plant. And again, that's extremely efficient. There's nothing, very, very little going to waste. But on the flip side, if you suddenly get increases in demand, well, you're not going to be able to deal with that for quite some time. And there is something of a hope, and when you're talking about economies, that there'll be some amount of robustness intrinsically built into them, simply by the nature of having lots of people doing things, that there's going to be some redundancy and so on. There's going to be somebody somewhere is going to have excess capacity that he's not using. And that can be the case, but sometimes... and especially, it's one of the things we're seeing with the nature of globalization, global trade, I should call it. That global trade tends to push people towards increasing efficiency, in that there are more and more people in more places, so that you're who will buy your stuff, such that you're less likely to have excess capacity to produce and things like that. So one of the things that we're seeing in general is that efficiency makes you wealthier, in the sense of you can have more things. You have things in the sense, I don't mean that in a crass materialist sense, but you have more of an ability to control your environment for the amount of work that you're doing. So in that sense, you are getting wealthier. If you measure wealth as your ability to control your environment, which is kind of a practical measure of wealth, that translates, outside of just, mere currency. If you measure it like this, what you find basically is that the world has gotten a lot wealthier, not in a uniform sense, but in the sense of more people have more of an ability to control their environment than, say, people did, say, 100 years ago. And part of this is that there's been a great increase in efficiency that has gone on. And, like another example of the sort of efficiency that we've gotten, Walmart pioneered the idea of using computers to keep track of inventory, to reduce the amount that you need to have in warehouses, to reduce the amount that you need to have people walking around and taking stock of what you actually need. And because everything is being scanned when it's being purchased, you can have computers that centrally just decide what, on the basis of algorithms, what all to go and restock shelves with. And it became much, much more efficient. They didn't need nearly as much human effort to maintain at least a similar amount of stocking levels and so on. And so their goods became even cheaper because there was less human effort necessary to achieve the same result. It was very, very efficient. But the upshot of that efficiency is, or the flip side of that efficiency is, that if anything goes wrong in the supply chain, then, well, downstream gets pretty screwed. You can see, and Walmart pioneered this like 30 years ago. Maybe even a little before that, I forget the exact time frame. That sort of thing, the just-in-time inventory is all over the place. Much, much more efficient. You don't have to have lots and lots and lots of warehouses with stuff that's not being used, just being stored in them. You don't have to have people whose jobs it is to take things off of trucks and put them into the big warehouses, only to later take them off and put them back onto trucks and get them out to somebody. You just get the stuff on the trucks to the people who actually want them. A lot more efficient. People are doing more useful work, useful in the sense of productive of the, of the end desired result, rather than of intermediate stuff. People who are warehousing are doing useful work, in the more colloquial sense of useful, but in the economic sense of useful, you can cut this out by using just-in-time stuff, and you get the same goods to the same people. When things are going well, it goes great. Things are cheaper, everything's the same. What's not to love? Well, just when things don't go well, when you have natural disasters, when you have pandemics, things like that, you start running into some very big problems because everyone is being so efficient. So it's something to understand that as we see, as we're seeing within the COVID-19 pandemic, as has been seen before, as will be seen again, anytime things go wrong and people are efficient, you start to see some pretty darn big problems showing up. And that's because efficiency is the enemy of robustness. And robustness doesn't look like it's worth spending money on when everything's going well. And then when things go badly, everyone wishes that they had spent more money on being robust. Do they actually wish it really? Harder to say there. Obviously, everyone wishes that they had, 2020 foresight. There's that saying, hindsight is 2020, but even there, it often isn't. People are often wrong even about the past. But there are often a lot of times when looking back and knowing how things actually turned out, you can say like, oh man, it would have been great if I had done this particular thing that at the time I didn't know I should do. But that sort of stuff aside, the trade-offs of efficiency and robustness are something that we will always have to grapple with. And it's really a matter of wisdom exactly how much you want to err on the side of efficiency versus err on the side of robustness. And about what? Because it may make perfect sense to err on the side of efficiency when it comes to something like, decorative hats, and to err on the side of robustness when it comes to very important things like medical equipment and steel and other, really essential things. So where you fall on efficiency versus robustness, that will in all cases be the subject that is properly, you need to be wise in order to know the correct answer, because there is not a one size fits all answer there. They're intrinsically enemies, and for every case, you need wisdom to get it right. Until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.